Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Bruno Bower. I'm the principal oboist and sometimes pre-concert speaker for West London Sinfonia. And the orchestra have asked me to make this short little introductory video for the most unusual piece in the programme for the 5th of July concert, and that is Gema Jawa by Nancy van der Weydt. Now the title translates as Impressions of Java, which might give you the flavour of something probably a lot older than it actually is. There's quite a long history of Western composers engaging with these sorts of ideas, but especially in the 19th century, we tend to view a lot of these products with quite a lot of suspicion. Now, very few of these 19th century or older pieces are really anything to do with the culture that they supposedly represent. They tend to just have a few kind of generic Western codes for foreign, exotic, and don't worry too much about the details. But van der Weydt's piece actually isn't really like that at all, and it comes out of this quite important shift in terms of how people were making pieces like this in the 20th century. It's actually beginning as early as the start of the 20th century, where, among other things, there were a number of big international exhibitions, 1880s, 1890s, 1900s, which drew musicians from a wide range of places around the world. Anyone going to these exhibitions could hear, in a sense, the real thing for themselves, and that's, maybe is starting to affect what composers might do if they want to be influenced by that. Indeed, even there are, travel companies which are exploiting technologies such as steamships to take tourists to ever further distant locations. And again, those people can kind of hear that music for themselves. But really, for Nancy van der Weydt, what we're talking about is the big boom in tourism that came post-World War II, especially with the growth of commercial aviation. Composers were no exception in wanting to go and see and hear these faraway places for themselves, and composers in particular did tend to kind of immerse themselves in the local musical culture, really getting to know these sounds firsthand. Alan Hovhaness went to India, Hawaii, South Korea and Japan. Steve Reich went to Ghana, David Fanshawe went all over Africa, Eliane Radigue went to Tibet, etc, etc, etc. There's a lot of composers who did this sort of travel in the second half of the 20th century. All of these composers then wanted to use what they'd heard as inspiration for their music, but they all knew full well the sort of trap that they would fall into if they tried to reproduce directly the sounds of what they'd been hearing. Earlier generations had no problem with this, but second half of the 20th century, composers are starting to realise that if they do that, then they're sort of displacing the original, trying to do the original better somehow, and they don't really want to do that. The vibe for this generation of composers is something a little more along the lines of, if you want to hear the real thing, hear it yourself, one way or another. But a composer can still express what this experience meant to them, just through their own language. And this is very much Nancy van der Weyt's approach for Gema Jawa. She spent 3 years in Indonesia, and she really loved the sounds of the gamelan that she was hearing there. But, as with those other composers, she didn't want to directly reproduce that sound. She wanted something that would convey her own experience with her own sounds. And I think that's one of the interesting things about this piece, that she's chosen what from a Western perspective would not be the standard pentatonic scale. You might see the word pentatonic in the programme booklet and you might expect something that sounds like this. The kind of black notes on the keyboard. And, that is what we think in the West, a pentatonic scale is. But she's not using that pentatonic scale, she's using this one. That's a very different sound altogether. So actually already kind of shifting our sense of what we mean by pentatonic. And she's bringing in the sense of space, the sense of repetition from the gamelan context as well, but again, filtered through her own voice. It's, you know, used expressively for her own experience. I should say, I think there's also a personal dimension from Van der Vate's own professional career too. While she was still working in the US, she was in the era where many composers were starting to get jobs in universities, and it's a very particular thing that starts to happen at this time. To get the university job, it comes with a salary to be a composer. You get paid to just simply exist in a university music department, sometimes not even with very many teaching requirements, and it's a very prestigious thing to get. Up until the mid-1970s, Van der Vaete was absolutely determined to get one of those university jobs. And so correspondingly, she wrote her music in a manner which she thought that academics would appreciate, that academics would respect, and found that doors were consistently closed to her. Very likely related to the fact that she's a woman, especially in this era of US history, but also especially in the deep south of the US. And I think that's one of the things that prompted her to then go elsewhere and have experiences in other places. She went to Hawaii for a while first and subsequently spent time in Indonesia. And I think she found herself considerably freer in these new environments. She could sort of do more of what she actually liked. She wasn't trying to chase any particular kind of institutional position with her pieces anymore. Gema Jawa is really accessible to listen to. It's the kind of piece that, you know, really wants you to know this is what it felt like to listen to gamelan music. It's not trying to impress you with its cleverness. It is actually quite clever, but it's not on the surface. It's not what the piece is ostensibly about. Quite sad to say that I won't be there on the 5th of July to hear it for myself, but I hope all of you enjoy listening to it. Thank you very much.